Hello everyone, this is Tim, and this is going to be a video response to DarkAgeOf RollPlayGame. And he's had some previous channels, and this is his current one. I'll put a link down there below. You can go check out Jason's channel. He's a opinionated sort of OSR guy who's branching out into different games and having new experiences, which is cool to see. This video in question, he's talking about the dependent nature on the GM in OSR games. You know, the quality of the experience relies too heavily on the DM or GM's shoulders. And he talks a little about that, and he's been playing some Ubiquity games, which I have yet to try out. So, you know, maybe I'll have some sort of eye-opening experience if I try out those games. I know RuneSlinger's always talking about it, so one day I'll give it a shot if I'm able. But I wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, my take on, you know, is that a flaw? Is that a strength? You know, when it comes to OSR games and just regular like D&D and, you know, Pathfinder and that kind of stuff. Jason starts talking about the, you know, the arbitrary nature of how you get to a success or failure. In a lot of the OSR games, there's different ways to go about things. And what I wanted to maybe emphasize is that a lot of it just boils down to a percentage. Maybe you need to do a little bit of statistics to figure that out. You know, some mechanics are a little bit more complex than others. For instance, like Old World of Darkness is a little tricky to figure out, you know, what is my actual chance of success here? You know, what if I roll a 1 and that cancels that 10? And does it explode? Do I have a specialty here? You know, so that can be kind of convoluted at times. And, you know, a lot of that percentage is hidden. And even, you know, as myself as an example, a lot of times I don't even know what the chance is. So, and again, emphasis on like the Old World of Darkness, dice pool kind of stuff. And I have yet to take statistics. I have to take that for my you know, 2-year degree that I've been working on. Going to be 40 in a couple years here. So, so I don't know. That's a little bit about myself. But yeah, I think a lot of it just boils down to statistics and the percentage of failure or success, or that gray area in between that games like Dungeon World and can't think of anything else right now. But you know, there's just optional rules in like D&D 5e. You know, if you're almost there, you know, you get that like success but at cost. You know, so that idea has been percolating through the community and different games for a while now. I really liked when I played Dungeon World. There were some examples of dice rolls that would fast forward through certain sections that I didn't really care for, like maybe like overland travel that I thought maybe got, you know, skipped ahead too fast or fast forwarded through. But for the most part, I did enjoy that, you know, the 2d6 and the range of success and, you know, what it means. And I loved in Dungeon World how you would crave that +1. And, you know, and that's also true for a lot of OSR games. That +1 bonus can be a huge difference, you know, especially in a binary success-failure type game. And even in those games, and I guess maybe this is Jason's point, it depends on the GM at the time. I know myself, if someone gets close, and I'm more apt to lean in their favor, you know, make it so that, yes, what they wanted kind of happens, but, you know, there's a little bit of complexity thrown in there, or somebody notices what they're doing, even though they succeed. You know, that catch, that little hook that comes about when, you know, it doesn't quite go the way you expect it to. And I love Firefly too. So, you know, things don't go smoothly. You know, even if they're successful, you know, there's going to be some tricky stuff going on, and maybe that says something about me as a GM. I was thinking about myself and how I adjudicate things. I try to be consistent. Jason mentioned that in a dogfight he used, you know, a rock and paper and scissors, you know, RPS. And that's just how he did it. That's what, and he had fun coming up with that idea. If I was that GM that came up with that idea, from then on, whenever there'd be another dogfight, because there's like a precedent kind of set, you know, whenever another dogfight would come about, okay, you better crack your knuckles and, you know, get ready to do the rock, paper, scissors thing, because that's what the group has set. When it comes to rulings and rules, I lean more towards rulings, but whenever a ruling is put in place, I like to keep track of it, like a list of previous rulings, something that I guess Tetsubo would call it a hole in a boat. And Tetsubo57 is a YouTuber that you can check out. He has a lot of politics and RPG videos and other things too. But back in the day, he was more RPG focused, and I followed him pretty regularly. And he mentioned Pathfinder and D&D 3.75. I can't remember the name of the system that he liked. It had something to do with light or sun. It was a different offshoot of the D&D 3.5 rules, like an updated version. And he really liked it because in his mind, a lot of those rule gaps or holes were filled by rules in the system. And while he might like that because he can reference certain pages and flip to it, myself, I'd rather have a rules light system and then fill in the gaps as I go and as they are needed. And I don't think there's a right or wrong there. It's just a preference, like many things in the RPG community. It's just one more thing that you can have an opinion on. I think if you're a GM, you need to sprinkle through your narration and description of things hints or blatantly just in their face ideas of what the chances of success could be if they wanted to do something. How challenging is this encounter? I've said before, like maybe they can come across a cave and there's bones littered all over the place. It should be pretty obvious that a lot of people have come here and a lot of people have died. So this is probably pretty challenging. But maybe you could even make it more blatant than that. Have someone who just barely survived and like 30 of his traveling companions were brutally slaughtered. And you can use like first person in character descriptions of what happened, and just sprinkle in different adjectives and just describe what exactly happened, how it happened, what this creature could do to a humanoid figure. Did it rip it in half? Did it, slit it, apart from like the throat down, just with its tongue? Just something like vivid like that. I think would give them a sort of hint, like, whoa, maybe we need to pack a few more extra supplies, or have a few more healing potions, or maybe we should hire on a few more hirelings, someone to kind of take some of the brunt of this creature's, violence. I don't know. Just, I think a lot of times, sometimes those hints will go unheeded, or players might not understand that that's what you're doing. And, while this might be frowned upon by some, I think that's where, like, out of character, like, game talk can happen. Like, just kind of talking like, if you're asking me how tough this is pretty tough, guys. I'm trying to show you this is tough. So going into it, don't like softball it to them, I guess, or just make it clear. Try to make it as clear as possible to your players how difficult something is, because I've learned over the years that if expectations are not met, sometimes people can have hurt feelings. So you want to try to inform them as much as possible of what's going on in the game, how the game is progressing, how it all works, so that those expectations are met and people don't get upset and really just end up leaving the game for something that can be handled in a better way at the table. I figured I'd talk a little bit about my Warhammer 2nd Edition campaign that was kind of short-lived, but I got in I think about 6 sessions, and what I noticed about that game is that the percentages in the skills were a lot lower than I was used to having in fantasy games. Or at least that's my impression of them. And I had some people point out, it's like, well, if you think about D20, and they try to convert it to D20 for me, I'm like, okay, so I guess some of those percentages are comparable, but it's just the impression of them being low was something that kind of bothered me. So when I ran that game, and I guess this is maybe proving Jason's point, there's a section talking about modifiers and bonuses and penalties, and I found that I was more lenient and I was more generous with giving out +10, +20, +30 to various attack rolls and skill rules and so forth. And I asked around, it's like, how do you guys think of how I'm running Warhammer? Am I being too generous? Because Warhammer has, kind of a reputation on being a tough, gritty, grimy sort of game. And everyone said that the way I was running was fine. So I think a lot of times too, like, all these opinions and things really just boil down to the people sitting at the table and not necessarily the internet audience. It's just whatever works for the group you're doing at the time. So again, maybe it proves his point. I was more lenient than, say, someone else who was running Warhammer, who would just maybe even forget that section entirely about the modifiers. And in that person's game, the players would succeed a lot less than they did in my game. And maybe that's part of the flavor of Warhammer that maybe I missed out on. But from my take on it, it seemed to work best by me doing that. And maybe that's just my me being an individual and doing it my own way, and maybe not. I don't know. Again, maybe it proves Jason's point. So we'll see. Maybe I agree with Jason here. I don't know. We'll check it out as I go through these. Wanted to mention about Jason's example. I believe it was African Queen, which I've never seen. It's a Bogart movie, apparently. Sounds like something that I would be into. But he talked about the way I would describe it is an extended action, and I get that from my time running White Wolf games. My first White Wolf game was Hunter the Reckoning, which I know some people really frown upon, but I really like that game and its tone and flavor and so forth. But I really enjoyed the extended actions in that. I liked that you could set a number, like maybe 9 successes. And however many times it took them to roll, each time they would roll, time would progress. So it seemed to really fit like that montage scene that you see in a lot of movies and TV shows and things. And I don't know if that is there in a lot of OSR games. I think Jason's video maybe realized that. It had to sink in, I think, that in a lot of OSR games it's just one roll. I mean, I guess you could house roll it and say, you need to get like 5 successful D20 rolls, and you could do an extended action in D20. But again, that's not rules as written. That's just my borrowing from other RPGs, which I think I do a lot. Maybe I do it more often than I realize when I'm running OSR games. I borrow from White Wolf games and maybe even story games with players narrating certain parts of success, or I'll ask them to describe what they see sometimes, which isn't everyone's bag, and sometimes I go too far. Sometimes people want an OSR experience, and I'm kind of ruining that by bringing in these other influences. So in a way, these OSR games being dependent on the GM is their own thing. It's an OSR flavored experience, and maybe what Jason's finding out is he's been drinking chocolate milk this whole time, and now he's trying out strawberry milk. He's like, that strawberry is pretty good, man. I still like chocolate, but I'm gonna start drinking more, strawberry milk. I'm gonna start stocking my shelves a little bit more with strawberry, and get some mint over here, and I'll get some green tea kind of flavored milk, which would probably be kind of gross, but you get the idea. I think it's cool seeing guys like IvanMike1968 and DarkAgeOf Jason just trying out new games and seeing how that influences their opinions. And I've seen that in my own life too, where I'll play a game and it'll kind of maybe get me in a different vantage point to looking at the hobby. And, I kind of like this, or I really don't like this at all. I kind of prefer a lot of that traditional, old school type way of doing things. I like in traditional games where you have a GM that is referee and rules adjudicator. Sometimes can't pronounce that word. It's a flesh and blood person sitting across the table from you. And in rules light games, they're going to fill these holes. And I want to trust that person. I really do. I want to trust that person to do the best they can, to try. If they make mistakes, I'm more of a forgiving person when it comes to these kind of things, because they're trying. They want to provide a good experience for everyone. And I'd rather trust a person that I can see, hear, and talk to than, say, like a team of game designers that are maybe hundreds of miles away from me. Maybe they have a different culture than I'm used to. Maybe they have different ideas about the world that I'm not really in favor of or disagree with, or maybe I agree completely. It doesn't really matter. I don't know them. I don't know what they're like, and they're making these decisions and putting all these rules in there. And those rules might not be good for our group. So I'm more, I guess it comes down to my idea of more representational local government than, say, like state and federal government trying to dictate what I can and can't do in real life. So I guess I'm bringing that into the RPG thing, where I'm kind of distrustful of hierarchy and authority. So, and maybe it's kind of weird that I want to give authority to another player at the table. And you know, there is risk there. You know, I've taken enough psychology classes to know that you know, hierarchy can do evil things. You know, someone in power, you know, a lot of people give them power just because they're in a position, or they have a title, or they wear some sort of badge, or, you know, official outfit or whatever. I don't know. But if it's just a friend of mine, sure, they can abuse that power. But I can also call them on their bullshit if I think it's that, and we can have a discussion about that. So I don't know. Maybe OSR games are too dependent, but I like that. I like that specific flavor of an RPG experience. And do I have to have that all the time? No. I can go to different experiences. I can have story games and White Wolf games, and you know, like I'm trying D&D 5th edition as a you know, example of doing something similar but in different ways. You know, I'm having a little bit of culture shock with D&D 5e. Runeslinger might be happy to know that I had all these house rules figured out for D&D 5e to make it more old school. And I realized I was turning off a lot of people, that, you know, what I wanted out of the game wasn't what they wanted out of the game. You know, I got a lot of eye rolls when I mentioned to, you know, more modern taste players what kind of house rules I was going to try to come up with. So that was an eye-opening experience for me. Even though D&D kind of emphasizes that you know, it's the DM's game and he can mix and match things, yeah, it was eye-opening to understand that the players didn't want my style of game out of D&D 5e. They wanted more of 5e than, you know, my take on things. So this is a long, rambling response. I don't really know if I have a conclusion. I think in some ways I agree with Jason and Ivan. I'll put their links down below to their videos. But I also don't mind, you know, being in those games like that. I don't know. Put down below any comments you guys have, and maybe this will generate some more responses out there. And I got some co-stars today, my little Tetra fish. So, all right, we'll talk to you later.